What's worse than stepping in cat barf in your socks? The GeForce FX series. What's worse than the GeForce FX series in general? The GeForce FX 5200 specifically. But how bad is this notoriously awful graphics card really? And how would it fare at retro PC gaming? Well, let's find out. This is Pixel Pipes. The GeForce FX series is on its own a storied and controversial generation of graphics cards. Introduced in 2003, NVIDIA touted the FX series for providing next-generation cinematic features dubbed CineFX, pushing the envelope for realism and fidelity. But the FX series architecture fundamentally lacked the raw performance power to actually use any of these cinematic features, and rather than being a showcase for movie-like rendering, image quality ended up taking a back seat to corner-cutting optimizations as NVIDIA desperately tried to raise its underwhelming performance up to competitive levels. One unique trait of the FX series was that all cards in the stack were built on 4 pixel pipelines, from the $400 flagship to the sub-$99 Office PC solution. Performance was reduced down the line by decreasing clock speeds, texture units, memory bandwidth, and other deeper aspects of the architecture, but I'll save the really detailed technical dive for a later video on the FX series in general. In the months and years following its release, the FX 5200 littered the market with confusing variants, all sporting a plethora of ambiguous suffixes. The difference in performance between them was drastic, as the 5200 Ultra was clocked much higher than the others, for example, while the SE cut memory bandwidth in half. To add further headaches to the situation, many unscrupulous card makers often sold crippled 5200s without any proper moniker, making it difficult to tell them apart and duping thousands of uninitiated consumers with inferior products. My FX 5200 is one such product. It's clocked at 250 MHz core and 400 MHz on the memory. The 5200's lack of Z-buffer and color compression probably doesn't help the already constricted 64-bit memory bus on my card, destroying any hope of high-resolution gaming. But what if you're not trying to use any of its cinematic features in newer titles that use DirectX 9? What if you just want to play older retro games that use DirectX 8, 7, or even OpenGL through the Quake III engine? These cards can often be found for under $10 on eBay, so what harm is there in evaluating how they handle games that predate it and demand much less from a GPU? First, let's see what it's like to actually play games. With the Serious Sam, the second encounter, the game actually runs very smoothly with nearly all the settings at max. At 800 by 600 resolution, no anisotropic filtering, between 45 to 55 frames per second. Bumping the resolution to 1024 by 768 is just a touch too much in this game. Quake III, maxed at 1280 by 1024, turns in very playable performance between 60 to 90 frames per second, with heavy firefights sometimes dropping the frame rate to the 40s. Return to Castle Wolfenstein runs very well at 1024 by 768, with its settings maxed between 40 to 50 frames per second. And then we have Expendable, which at 1280 by 1024 runs between 30 and 50 frames per second, with everything turned up. But now, what if we did a bit of a comparison between the super budget card from 2003 and flagship DirectX 7 cards from 2000, as well as some older inexpensive cards? So here you can see I've included DirectX 7 cards from ATI, as well as the dirt common GeForce 4 MX440 and popular mainstream cards like the GeForce 3 Ti200 and the GeForce 4 Ti4200. The 5200 scores 5,402 here in 3D Mark 2001, and as you can see it does manage to best the flagship cards from 2000, the Radeon DDR and the GeForce 2 GTS, but is actually beat by the Ultra variant and even the MX440, which is a 128-bit card in this case. In Quake III, you can see proof that the card is running the game very smoothly, showing 58 frames per second by average, in this case matching the millennial flagships Radeon DDR and GeForce 2 GTS, but is easily beat by every other card on the chart. The MX440 does a whopping 41% better in this test, provided you don't accidentally buy a 64-bit version. Slave Zero is a new test to the suite, and despite releasing all the way back in 1999, can be a very strenuous game on old cards. or just very crippled cards, as the FX 5200 spits out the slowest frame rate of the whole bunch, actually dipping slightly below the 30 FPS threshold commonly considered the lowest acceptable performance for gaming. The starting point for a comfortable experience at this resolution is really the Radeon 7500 at 41.3 frames per second. Serious Sam SE once again shows the 5200 in the poorest possible light, where even the lowly GeForce 2 GTS can outperform it by 3.5 frames. The inexpensive MX 440 isn't that much further ahead, however, at only 31.1 FPS, and both are significantly outdone by the ancient Radeon DDR, which, like the 7500, benefits from having triple texture rendering enabled in this game. It's one of the very few games to cater to stranger architectures like the R100 based Radeons. And lastly, we have Doom 3, which isn't the normal sort of game that you'd be running on hardware of this age, but it gives an extreme workout to these cards and definitely shows interesting performance characteristics. The FX 5200 happily manages to beat the MX 440 for the first time in these benchmarks, likely owing to its Ultra Shadow technology showing off some extra efficiency in this game. It's still not enough to match the low-end GeForce 3 Ti 200 and is leagues behind the Ti 500 and Ti 4200, as has been the case throughout all the tests. The results would significantly change if you have an FX 5200 with the full 128-bit memory interface. But the fact remains that unfortunately this is probably the most common version of the card you'll find, and while cheap, it's still a remarkably poor value compared to inexpensive DirectX 7 cards in older games that it can actually play well. Granted, it will still probably outperform any GeForce 2 MX variant card or pre-GPU era card, and if you have one lying around or you can get one for little or nothing, it can give you an enjoyable experience in a retro machine intended for games from 2002 or prior at conservative resolutions. It would certainly be preferable to stepping in cat barf in any circumstance. If you enjoyed this rendezvous with the lowest of the GeForce FX line, please click the like button and stick with this channel for more nerdy junk food like this in the future. Thanks for watching. I'm Nathan, and this has been Pixel Pipes.